G'day ladies and gentlemen, legends of the highest regard. I just wanted to pop in before the video starts and let you know that this is the idiot's guide to the PMDG DC6. I am the idiot, and I will be endeavouring in this video to provide you with a simplistic way for you to be able to fly the DC6 from cold and dark through the whole flight procedure, land at your destination airport, and finish in a hot and dark situation, I guess, seeing as you will have just landed. Just wanted to pop in and just detail that before we got into the video, and yeah, let's do it. G'day, ladies and gentlemen, legends of the highest regard, and welcome back to the Just Some Aussie Gamer channel, and another new thing within Microsoft Flight Simulator coming direct to you from me. And that is a idiot's guide to study level and difficult payware aircraft. The idiot being me. And basically the idea is that the idiot provides a foolproof guide on how to fly these aircraft step by step, basically unlocking a lot of potential for people who are not so confident when it comes to simming. Yeah, I mean, that's basically what it is. So in today's episode, we are going to do the PMDG DC6. So this will be several videos. Today's video is going to be the in-depth way that you would usually expect to run a DC6. From pre-start to start to pushback, taxi, takeoff, climb, cruise, descent, approach, landing, and shutdown. And then in future videos, we'll show you more in-depth things such as running the fuel systems, how to swap between tanks, scenarios like that, as well as we'll also provide a video which will basically be known as hot dogging the DC6, which is where you run it hot and hard, a bit like every Saturday night at the nightclub, and you can sort of have a bit more fun, and it's a more simple way of running the DC6, and you know, you can sort of use it when you're chilling out with friends, having a bit of a mess around within the sim. So, as you can see right now, we have the DC6 in front of us. It's the DC6B. It's in the Pan Am World Airways logo, and we are currently here at Long Beach Airport in or near to Los Angeles, and we'll be flying over to San Francisco today. So the first thing you want to do once you load up, now you will load up in the cockpit. I've just gone to the external view, but you will load up in the cockpit. The first thing you want to do is you want to get into, if you aren't in the cockpit, you want to get into the cockpit using whatever button you utilize to do that. Then you want to be hitting Control 0. You want to grab that red lever, you want to click it, that unlatches the window. Then you want to drag said window across like so. Then down here you'll see we have an iPad. Basically you want to drag that tablet up, and what you want to do is you want to open your front cabin exit and your main cabin exit, like so. You also want to make sure that your ground power unit is attached. It should be by default, but just make sure to check that before doing anything once the tablet is open. Then, once you've opened your two exits, then you do your front cabin stairs and you do your main cabin stairs. You can also open your cargo holds at this place. At this point, should I say. Now, during the shutdown, obviously that's when the oil pans, mechanic stands, wheel chocks, pitot covers, all those things come into play. They are not something that is worth considering at this point in time. So, you can obviously also set aircraft state simply by pressing the button. So you can select cold and dark, which is what we currently are. You can select ready for start, where it has the things ready for you to just start the aircraft, or you can even use ready for taxi. So what you want to do is you want to go to your fuel/load manager, and obviously you want to play with your passenger load and your fuel based on calculations of the route that you are going for. Now, today's flight, we're just going to go with what's currently on board, but we are going to add some passengers. So basically, the aircraft can take up to 68 passengers. We're just going to put a decent payload on there. We're going to put 40 passengers in. And then we'll just throw in, I don't know, a couple of £1,000 of cargo. Now, it is a short flight. It's only an hour. So basically, you can click or you can scroll with your mouse on those items. And then you'll see, you know, this is where you can set your fuel to 100%, set your fuel to 50%, deal with your tanks individually. These are all things that when you set up a flight plan that you will obviously calculate to match what it needs to match on the screen. So once you have done that, then you want to go across to the maintenance manager, and you just want to repair all engines by clicking on repair engine. Then you want to be repairing the propellers by clicking on the service propellers all the way across. Then you want to top up your engine oil, because the last thing you want to do is run your radials out of engine oil. And then you just want to make sure that your water alcohol is topped up, that your auxiliary oil is topped up, that your anti-ice fluid is topped up as well. Now, you don't have to do the engine repairs. I just like to implement it into how I set up this aircraft for a flight, simply because it means that you aren't going to have any issues whatsoever. However, obviously, if you are running this on a more realistic basis, whether it be with a virtual airline, within, you know, one of the many programs that's available for the sim, you may have different rules that you may have to follow, etc. And you may only be able to do things like topping up the engine oil and stuff like that. That's not an issue. So now that you've done all that, just go back to the ramp manager, make sure that that ground power unit is attached. Very important at this point that you have the ground power unit attached. Now, leave the iPad open, and the next port of call is we're going to press Control 3 on the keyboard, okay? Now, these are your fuel selector tanks, okay? Those 4 levers that I am running the mouse across right now. So, you want to have all 4 of those fully forward. It's going to take 2 clicks of the mouse on each one, like so. Then you want to make sure that your fuel cross feeds are also fully forward. Now, they should be fully forward by default when you load up in the aircraft. However, if you've done a shutdown and then you are restarting, there is obviously the potential that they will have moved, and you should always check these things. And then you want to make sure that your prop pitch control, your propeller pitch lever, is 100% forward as well. Now, so then once you've done all of that, then you need to press Control 5 on your keyboard. And what you want to do is make sure that your mixture lock, which is this one, is unlocked, and that all 4 of your mixtures are at idle cutoff. You also want to make sure, these are your carburetors here, you want to make sure that they are all at 0% at this point. And then you want to make sure that your hydraulic bypass lever is on. That means that your hydraulic system bypass lever, which is this black lever here, is down. Right, once all that's done, and you just need to obviously check these things because you don't want to catch yourself out, and you want to run through these steps, because not running through these steps means that you probably will end up with a false start on an engine or some sort of issue down the track with the aircraft. Okay, so once you've done that, then you want to be pressing Control 6. So once you have Control 6, use obviously your mouse to adjust it the way you would like. Then you want to turn the battery ground power switch, which is the one that's below plain battery / ground power. So it's the one that's here, battery and ground power. You want to turn that on. Basically what that does is gives you the ground power from your ground power unit. Then you want to hit that button, which means that the plane's battery is then being charged by the ground power, and you should have a amber light that illuminates above that switch. Then you want to have your inverter switches. So your inverter switches are these ones here, 1, 2, and 3. So 2 of them are inverters, and the other one is the engine inverter. So you want to click on each one of those with the upwards arrow. All 3 of them want to be on. Then you want to find your generators. So your generators are these 4 switches here. Okay? And you want to go through and you want to turn each of those generator switches on. Now, your seatbelt and no smoking are over here in the second level down from the top on the left-hand side. So, turn your no smoking, turn your seatbelt chimes on, and then your lights, which are here, you do as required. Now, because we are on the ground, I'm going to have all my lights on. The other thing that you need to do is your beacon light. So your beacon light is down from your no smoking and seatbelt lights. And you just flick that on as well. So then what we want to do is we want to check the external air temperature that we currently have, because that will help us to determine what temperature we would like our radome / windshield de-ice to be at. So Control 2 brings us down, and then what we need to do is we need to look for the free air dial, which is the one that is on the right hand side here, first row, 3 down. And what that's basically telling us is that we have 19 degrees Celsius, or just over 40, or actually about 50-ish degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not quite able to read that. That's that. Then, once you've determined what that tells you, you need to select Control 7 on your keyboard. And what that does is it brings you up to here. And as you can see, we have windshield heat and radome anti-icing. And basically, you can move this switch depending on what your exterior temperature is. Now, you need to adjust this as the exterior temperature changes. Okay? So, we are currently above 10 degrees Celsius, so we are not going to touch that. However, if you were between 10 degrees and 0 degrees Celsius, you would go to that marker. And if you were anywhere between 0 and minus 40 degrees, you would go to that marker. And then if you actually need anti-icing, you bring it all the way around to that one. Now, you don't bring it around to that one unless there is visible moisture. And the last thing that you do up here at Control 7 is in the middle here, you'll see 2 switches that are surrounded by a red sort of guard, I guess. On the left-hand side is your cabin heater master. You want to flick that on. Right, then you want to go to Control 8 on your keyboard. Familiarize yourself with all the dials and stuff. Don't be scared to take your time and read. This is your battery amperage. This is your anti-icing fluid, how much you have. This is how much auxiliary oil you have. This is how many oil gallons you have in the engines. Your hydraulic reservoir, your water, your fuel quantity in each and every tank, etc., etc. Your oil temperature, your oil pressure, you know, all those things that are very important. Don't be scared to take the time to familiarize yourself with these particular items, because it will help you in the long term learning the aircraft. Okay, so what you want to do is here you have your cowl flaps. As you can see, the label, the big middle part at the bottom here. So basically you want to bring your cowl flaps fully open. Now you can do that by clicking, or you can do that by spinning your mouse wheel, whatever works for you. You can also hold down your mouse and it will make its way around. So you bring all 4 of those to open, right? Now you want to turn your radios on. So the small button here on the ADF, hit that, and the radio comes on. Okay? Then same on COM2, radio comes on. And finally, the small COM1 volume button up here on your Garmin, you hit that and your Garmin comes on. At this point, you want to make sure that you hit your CDI, and you can see now that it has changed to GPS in the bottom left-hand corner. So that means that it will follow your flight plan. Now, at a later point, I will show you in a separate video how to program this particular Garmin GPS with your flight plans. It is very simple. However, for the benefit of being nice and simplistic today, quite simply, I'm going to assume that you've already set up your flight plan in the world map within the sim before you've loaded in. And if you have, therefore that has already been loaded in for you into your Garmin. Okay, so now you want to set your cabin temperature. So to do that, you want to hit Control 9. Now, as you can see, up the top here, you have your cabin temperature control. Okay? So I always sort of try to set it around 75, and that is in Fahrenheit. And 75 Fahrenheit is about 24 degrees Celsius. Okay? The next thing you want to do is you'll need to move your camera ever so slightly to bring it into a better view. But down here in the very bottom left, you have your cabin pressure regulator. And using this dial, the bigger of the two that is in the bottom left, what you want to do is this is your altitude. And you want to bring this arrow, by turning that dial, around to what your cruising altitude is going to be. And basically that tells the aircraft what it has to do with its cabin pressure for the passengers to keep them safe, healthy, and alive. So don't fuck this one up. No, I'm only kidding. Within the sim, you obviously won't have death on your hands. So what I'm going to do is I'm going for a 15,000 feet cruise altitude today. So we're going to bring all the way around past 10,000, continuing on. And there we go. So that is now at 15,000. So at this point, this is where you now close up all the doors, all the stairs, all the windows. So we're going to go back to the iPad, which is Control 0. And basically, you're going to roll up the stairs first. So main cabin stairs, front cabin stairs, and cargo holds. Now, they won't move across until the item has been folded up, like how you just saw. Then, you want to close your main cabin door, and you want to close your front cabin door. And again, they will move across once they are closed. And there you go. Now you know that it's all closed. So what you want to do now is you want to keep the ground power unit. However, you do want to fold the iPad away at this point. because you need to have access to your window, because you need to now drag it to the point where it won't allow you to drag it anymore, and then you hit that red lever again and it will latch the window closed. Now, if you've set up all of that, you are at the point where you are ready to run through the engine start checklist. All right, so the first thing to do before the engine start checklist is to make sure your parking brake is on. The second thing to do is to crack your throttles somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 open. This is simply because we are dealing with old piston radial style engines and they need a bit of coercive, you need to coerce them a bit to get them to behave at startup. Now, another thing that I will show you in a future video is how to use water injection for a short field takeoff within the DC6. We won't use that today. We will do a short field flight, and that information will be available alongside the running the D6 hot or hot dogging the DC6 that I will do in the future. And basically, we will go through, you'll be able to utilize the steps from in this video, as well as the additional steps from in that video when it comes to the water methanol injection side of things. And you'll be able to merge them together and sort of understand how you start the aircraft in this semi-professional-ish way. Once you've done your parking brake on and put your throttles in about 1/8 to 1/4, what you then want to do is you want to go up to control 5, or you want to go across to control 5, should I say. You want to, so the starting order is 3, 4, 2, and 1. So on engine number 3, so the mixture, which is this one here, you want to go up to auto rich. So that will take 2 clicks, okay? And that's all you want to do down here at control 5. Then you want to control 6 on your keyboard or whatever you have, and then you want to be turning engine number 3's magnetos to both, like so. So basically what you're doing there is you're creating the option for ignition. Then here you have your ENG selector or your engine selector, and you want to move that to engine 3. Once you've done that, you want to go to your main fuel booster pumps, because we are using the main fuel tanks today. We will do a video on alternate fuel pumps at another point. So I just want you to focus on these 4 fuel pumps. And what you want to do is you want to go down to low. You can go up to high. If you're in a really cold location, maybe it is worth going up to high, but we're going to go to low, okay? Like that. Okay, so the next part requires a bit of concentration from myself and from you. You need to use your hearing, especially when it comes to this next part. So what we're going to do is we have these 4 buttons here, okay? So what you need to do is you need to press on the one that says start. Now start will automatically activate the engine start safety switch as well. Then you need to listen for the aircraft will count 3, 6, 9. At 9 or after you hear 9, now there's no rush here as such, but obviously the longer you wait, the more fuel is being pumped into the motor or the engine. So at the call or after the call of 9, you want to hit boost and you want to hit prime. And that will basically give you that extra injection of fuel that you need for the aircraft engine to start. Okay? So I'll demonstrate to you now, and then we will go through it again for every single engine. So start, as you can see that switch moved.
3, 6, 9.
There we go, 9 is activated. And as you can hear, we have an active engine. Everything's moving around, everything's vibrating a bit. The switches will go back to normal on their own when the engine is ready. You don't need to touch anything there. As you can see, all the switches just move their way back. So then you want to turn your fuel booster pump back to off. Okay? Then what you need to do is that you need to just repeat those steps for every single engine. So now we're going to start engine number 4. So we're going to come back down to control 5. We're going to put some auto rich mixture. So you need to make sure that you have auto mixture turned on in your menu for this aircraft. Otherwise, you're going to have a really rough time unless you have a proper mixture lever that is separate from your flight controls and you're not trying to use a keyboard or something. That may be the only scenario where you're not up shit creek without a paddle. So, once you've brought that up to auto rich, we're going to go back up to control 6 again. And what we're going to do is we're going to do the magnetos again. So this time we're going to do engine number 4 or magneto number 4. We're going to switch that across to both. Then we want to select the engine selector across to engine 4. So as you can see, it's now pointing at engine number 4. Then you need to put your main fuel booster pump to low for engine number 4. So down like so. As you can see, that has now gone down. And then, again, we're going to do with the start switch, wait for the count, get to 9, 9 or after 9, we're going to put boost and prime in. Okay?
3, 6, 9, 12.
And then, just let it do its thing. And as you should see now, we should have 2 engines that are started. If you are concerned, don't be scared to go to the exterior of the aircraft. As you can see, engine 3, engine 4 are started, and they are starting to warm up already. Right, so now we want to start engine 2. So back down to control 5. We go mixture up to auto rich. Then we go to control 6. And again, we repeat the same steps we repeated previously. We want to go to the magnetos. Make sure that the magneto for engine 2 is set to both. Then come back on the engine selector switch until the arrow is pointing at engine number 2. I just noticed I didn't turn my fuel pump off. That's very important. Make sure you turn your fuel pump, booster pump off once everything is in working order. So that's my bad there. But it's not the end of the world if you do forget it, because as long as you don't forget it after starting engine number 1, which is your last engine to start. So, now that you've selected engine selector number 2, you want to bring your main fuel booster pump down for engine number 2 to low. And then we're going to just do the same thing again with the start button. So we're going to hit it.
3, 6, 9.
There we go, 9. We boost and we prime. Come down, watch the dials. There we go. Dials are going up. That means, so watch your BMEPs. That you will always see your dials move, your BMEP, your manifold pressure, your RPMs, etc. They will all move whenever you have a successful engine start. Now, it is not uncommon, because this is a study level aircraft, for you to have a false engine start. It's not the problem. You just go through the whole steps again from the start until you get a clean engine start. If you're not getting clean engine starts, you may be missing a step, go back, take your time. This isn't a race to fly this aircraft. Okay? I want to make it very clear that it is not a race. So at this point, all the buttons are back on the starting area. I'm going to take my main fuel booster pump off. Now, we're going to go back down to Control 5 again. Whoops, I hit the wrong. There we go, that's better. I accidentally hit the mouse at the same time that I did that and resulted in a very interesting look. So now engine 1 rather, is up to auto-rich mixture. Now, Control 6 takes us back up to the top panel again, and we want to work through the same steps that we've worked through for the other 3 engines for engine number 1. So, bring the magneto across to both. Then, we want to bring the engine selector across to engine 1. So now as you can see, the arrow is pointing at engine 1. Then we go to the main fuel booster pump 1, we bring it down to low. And simply, we're going to hit the buttons to start again. And at the end of this, you should have 4 running, warming up DC6 engines.
3, 6, 9.
And there we go, boost and prime. Like so. So all the gauges now seem to be doing things, as you can see. The RPM gauges are up, the manifold pressure gauges are up, the BMEP gauges are up, fuel flow is up, everything is doing a reading, oil pressure, all that, fuel pressure, etc. Now the gauges will all read slightly different because we are dealing with an old piston radial aircraft here. That is not uncommon in any way, shape or form. They will stabilize as they warm up. If you are at all concerned about the position of where the engines might be, Control 0, you bring up your tablet and you want to click on Engine Stress Visualizer. So basically, this will give you a rundown of your overboost, where your mixture is at, where your engine RPM is at, where your cylinder head temperature is at, where your carburetor temperature is at, where your oil temperature is at, and where your oil pressure temperature, or oil pressure, should I say, is at. So, as you can see at the moment, everything is good except for carburetor temperature, which of course makes sense because we've just started the engines. And it is pretty common also for oil temperature and oil pressure to take a bit of time to come into effect. As you can see, engine 1 is starting to get the right oil temperature and the right oil pressure. You need to give it time to get to, so now you can see we've got green ticks. Carburetor temperature, not such a worry at this point, especially considering the exterior temperature around the aircraft. Obviously, we're going to keep warming the engines up here whilst we sort out other things. The carburetor temperature will come up because you'll also warm up as you taxi to the runway. So it is not a concern at this point. So at this point we'll going to go to the ramp manager because the next few steps are going to involve disconnecting the ground power unit, but you obviously need to make sure that everything is where it's meant to be before you remove that unit. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go up to Control 6. We're going to turn that fuel booster pump off because now all the engines are where they're meant to be. We also want to now select engine selector to off. Okay? So now you have a DC6 sitting here running with everything where it's genuinely meant to be at this position on the ground. Okay? Now you want to go back up to Control 6, which we're already there until I hit my mouse, which was a bit silly on my behalf. Now, you want to take that to the plain battery. So you're going to extinguish the amber light, but that is not a problem, okay? That is not an issue because that enables us to disconnect the ground power unit from the aircraft, and the aircraft is now using its own power to maintain power to all the various sources that is required. Okay, so now that we're at this point, what we then want to do is we want to come back down to control 5, and your mixture lock, you want to arm your mixture lock, and that basically means you can't play with the mixtures by accident and cause a serious issue. What we also want to do now is we want to set flaps for 20 degrees, like so. That is your takeoff flaps, is 20 degrees. Okay? Finally, we can now go across to control 0. We can remove the ground power unit. We want to go across to the engine stress visualizer page, and we want to lower the iPad down. You can leave the iPad up if it helps you feel better, but you don't need to. Alright, so now, before we do anything more, we want to lower the armrests. So all you do is you just click on the armrests, like so, and then we want to lower the engineer's seat. Now, if at any time during this you do feel overwhelmed by this aircraft, and it can occur, please remember that in real life it takes 3 people to fly this plane. So don't stress. If it takes you a few goes to get it all going and under control and have a good understanding, it just does. That's not a problem. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to reduce engine power back to idle thrust, which is going to cause a bit of vibration and blah. Nothing to be worried about. The amber lights may also illuminate. Again, nothing to be greatly concerned about. It is simply because you are running at idle. It will all sort itself out. So now what you want to do is you want to, and we'll go to exterior view for this. We want to remove the parking brake, and we would like to have a pushback. So now you just do that in the normal way that you would remove the parking brake, and you do that in the normal way that you would request a pushback, simply by hitting Shift P, and it does its thing. What we will then do, once we have pushed back, we will taxi to the active runway. You do not need to do anything special here. Watch your speed, watch your turning, take your time. It isn't a race. The longer you take, the better of an understanding you're going to have of how the aircraft reacts under certain engine loads, under certain steering inputs. You know, I'm going to keep hammering in that thing. It is not a race. Now, we're going to be following this other DC6 out. And we're going to go take off on the same runway that he's going to be taking off on. He's basically our lead pilot. He's watching over. He's making sure that we're not going to have any issues. And he wanted to join the flight plan as well. And he's very good when it comes to DC6s. So, anywhere sort of there is absolutely fine for your pushback. Now, go back into your interior. Your oil pressure is going to have a question mark against it. Do not be concerned. Now, you don't have to fly from in the interior. You are more than welcome to fly this from the exterior. Your call. I simply am going to fly it from the interior. Now, you'll notice I put in a very small amount of engine power, and then I move the rudders to turn, as if it's any other aircraft within the sim. Now, you'll find that these piston radials have a lot of power, and you don't need a huge amount of power input to get any sort of reaction to occur. And you'll see over in the bottom right that the levers for the engines are continuously moving up and down. Now, that is because I am just adjusting the amount of engine power I need based on where I'm turning, where I'm going straight, what am I going into a headwind, do I have a tailwind, etc. Now, you probably think, oh, these things don't make any real difference on the ground. In an aircraft like this, yes, they do. You'll also notice that our oil pressure is stabilizing the more that we use taxi power here. So we'll just slowly but surely taxi out. Now, usually in the real world, you would stop at this coming up marker and you would ask for ATC, and they would give you permission to cross the runway. Or if you're not using ATC, you would obviously stop, look, listen, think, etc. We're not bothering with that because this is simply a training flight. So when we do come up here, we've got a very decent taxi speed occurring right now. So we're going to use a bit of brake, just a dab of brake, and we're going to slowly make a right-hand movement here with the rudder. Now, this tutorial assumes that you have access to a joystick or rudder pedals or some sort of flight control stick. Obviously, if you don't, I can recommend please watching a video on how to fly Microsoft Flight Simulator using keyboard and mouse before you come and watch this, because I obviously cannot provide the buttons that are needed for each and every scenario based on your hardware. So as you can see, nice, easy cruise, no rushing. We haven't felt at any time like we've had to slam the brakes on or take a corner extremely, aggressively. None of that is required. Take your time, learn the aircraft. Even when you're up in the air, you don't need to rush. You need to be continuous and make sure that you are flowing on from step to step, but at no point do you need to feel panicked or under pressure to do certain things. So as you can see, we're slowing up a bit, so I'm giving it a little bit more gasola. That's the technical term, or at least that's what I'll tell myself. And there we go. Now we've got a good ground speed occurring again. We can come back to idle thrust. Now you'll notice every time that you come back to idle thrust that your oil pressure lights will start to illuminate. Don't be concerned, because once we get here to the runway, the chance of you being at idle thrust between now and when you switch off is only going to be a couple of minutes. So as we can see, our other friend here in the DC6 is sitting on the runway waiting to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up to the top here, we're going to round this corner to the right, and we're going to pull up at the runway waiting position, and then we're going to quickly, well, when I say quickly, there is no race involved, but we are going to move the switches and dials that we need to move that then put the aircraft in a position for takeoff readiness. Okay? Okay, so now we'll go for a quick outdoor view. As you can see, there we go. So now we'll come back to the interior view. Now, I have noticed that it will always go straight for the iPad. That can get a little bit frustrating. I'm sure there's a way to work around it. I haven't figured it out yet, but I'm sure somebody will be able to point me in the right direction. So, now we need to go across to Control 5, and down here, that is your gust lock. So you need to click on that, and you need to disengage that. Very important. Now, the landing lights are already done. Should we have done them earlier? Probably not, but it just removes one thing that it's one less thing that you have to think about at the time when we get to this point. Makes your life easier. So then we need to go Control 8, okay? Now, we need to put our cow flaps in a take-off position, and we need to put our pitot heat on. So, the cow flaps, as you can see, above 3 degrees, it says take off, okay? So we need to bring each cow flap back to 3 degrees. If you forget this step, it isn't a problem. as long as you don't have realism turned on within the sim. Okay? Now, up here is the pitot heat and scoop heaters. Maximum ground operation, 1 minute. So, it is literally the last thing you do before you take off. If we were going to do a short field water injection takeoff right now, I would now go to control 6, I would turn the water injection switches on, and then I would turn my pitot heat on. But as we are not doing a water injection takeoff today, all I'm simply going to do is turn my pitot heat on, and you'll see the amperage goes up, and then we're going to come back, we're going to move forward onto the runway, you'll notice as well that all your dials seem to be stabilized as well now, where they meant to be. You know, things aren't in weird locations, etc., etc. And then simply take your time, position yourself where you feel comfortable on the runway, obviously as close to the middle as you possibly can. I'm going to let my power out, and I'm just going to make slight adjustments at this low speed until I'm happy with my direction on the runway, and then I'm going to come to a stop. Now, at this point, you just give your dials one more quick look over. Okay, so parking brake is set. We're in our position where we want to be on the runway. Right here is your airspeed indicator. Okay, now you may find that you need to zoom in to read it better. But as you can see, there is a white arc. Now between 100 and 120, preferably between 100 and 110, but between 100 and 120 is rotate speed. So what you want to do is you want to, with your parking brake on, move the levers forward a little bit, you know, about a quarter. Make sure that all your dials are not reading completely different things. You know, you'll be able to figure out very quickly when you look at dials that are next to each other and one's reading off the charts and one's reading nothing at all, something's wrong, you know? So basically, we're going to bring the throttle up, we're going to remove the parking brake, then we're going to throttle up more. If we're still stabilized, we're going to go full throttle. We're going to go for 100 to 110 knots for a rotate. Once we've rotated, we want to retract the landing gear, and then we want to climb. But we don't want to climb too aggressively. We want to try and maintain 140 knots. Once we exceed 140 knots, we need to retract the flaps. Okay? Once we've retracted the flaps, then we're going to accelerate to 160 to 180 knots. Okay? All of this will still be demonstrated to you and reverbalized again, but I just figured I'd give you a general rundown before we went ahead and did it, because obviously when things are happening at speed, it can be harder to take in. So now you're going to receive the information 2 or 3 times about the same steps. So, I'm going to, as you can see, all my dials all move in sync the way they are meant to. Take that off, aircraft is moving, nothing is awry, we're going full power. Going to come back slightly on the view. So obviously, as in a normal takeoff, just adjust your rudders to make sure that you maintain a straight position on the runway. And as we're coming up over 100 knots, we're going to start to pull back, and there we go. We have liftoff. Obviously, you need to adjust for any crosswinds or anything that may occur. So now the landing gear is coming up, and we can nose up a little bit and gain some altitude here because we do have flaps on our side and we're already getting close to 140 knots. Obviously, we want to try and get to 500 feet before we're retracting anything. For safety purposes. So now we're at 500 feet. We'll keep the nose forward a little bit. There we go. Now as we pass 1,000 feet, We can bring the nose forward a little bit more, get us up to that 140 knot speed. There we go, we're at 140 knots now. So in a moment we're going to accelerate past 140, and at that point I will retract the flaps and I will bring the nose down a little bit further so that we do not potentially lose speed or altitude. So now I'm simply retracting the flaps, letting the nose come forward a little bit, allowing the speed to climb, obviously not allowing the nose to completely go forward. There we go. Don't be scared to adjust your trim. And there we go. So now we're accelerating and we're up above 160 knots. You want to basically get your trim to the point where you can sort of let the aircraft do its thing without being concerned about it. So right now I'm pretty happy with where the aircraft is trimmed to. Our speed is good. We are holding a constant climb. We are through 3,000 feet. The gear is up, the flaps are up. Now, all right, so as you can see, we're coming up through where we need to be, okay? So now we're on a slight bank, so we want to be coming down to control 5. We want to be turning the gyro pilot on, okay? The auto gyro switch. Then we want to bring the autopilot clutch, which is this button down here, on. And then we want to turn the autopilot mode gyro pilot across to localizer. So that's one click across to the right, like that. And then we want to set our climb to 1,000 feet a minute. So right now we are climbing at 1,500. So this is the climb guide wheel here. So basically we want to nose down, and this is our climb dial here, okay? So we want to just keep nosing down that glide wheel until we are at 1,000 feet per minute climb, okay? Now, again, this is not a race. You are not going to damage the aircraft within the sim unless you have all failures turned on in any way, shape or form. We're going to need one more of those, okay? So, then we need to set, so that's 1,000 feet per minute climb rate is what you want to try and achieve. Then you need to look behind. In fact, let's go Control 2. And as you can see, these are the engine RPMs. So to adjust engine RPMs, first hold Control and then F2 or F3 unless you have another controller. And basically, what you want to do is you want to bring your engine RPMs to somewhere between 2,500 and 2,600. Like so. Okay? And then, this is your throttle BMEP. Okay? You want to keep it between 210 and 240 for climb. Okay? And then, at this point, you just need to watch your altitude. So we're climbing through 8,000 feet. And when we get to the desired altitude that we are looking for, I will show you what needs to be done. So you will need to adjust that autopilot climb guide wheel a few more times. You just need to keep checking on your climb dial. I'm doing it from control 2 position just by cameraing down. You can come back to control 5 if you're more comfortable from looking down here and looking there. So as you can see, we are now back down towards 1,000 feet per minute climb rate, okay? As you can also see the BMEP, you need to monitor the BMEP. So we need a little bit more. And as you can see, I'm just touching the throttle and straight away we are getting a result. So now we can have a good look at the aircraft from the outside. As you can see, we are flying no problems. There is no issues, nothing to be concerned about at this point. So, to summarize the climb procedure and engine management for you, so this is where I was talking about you're going to get the same information 3 times, okay? So, you need to Leave the props set to a climb RPM. Keep increasing the throttle to maintain between 210 and 240 BMEP. The higher you climb, the closer to 210 the BMEP is going to be. Okay? Passing 10,000 feet, turn off the landing lights and retract them. Monitor your carburetor temperatures over on the iPad as well as on the dials, and if you need to, use the carburetor heat levers to put the heat in. Okay? Once you reach a stage where you have hit full throttle during the climb, allow the manifold pressure to reduce to 35 to 38 inches, and then we will switch on the superchargers. Now I will detail all of this for you in depth. I just wanted to give you a breakdown of what you need to achieve. Once the superchargers have been switched on, you will need to reduce the throttle again to maintain a BMEP of 210 for the remainder of the climb. Okay? You will still have to advance the throttles again as you climb higher. Monitor your aircraft for icing and de-ice as required. Icing can occur in any temperature range from plus 10 degrees Celsius to negative 40 degrees Celsius when there is visible moisture present in the air. Okay? So, we're back in the interior now. We're going to have a look at what's going on. So as you can see, our BMEP has dropped below 200. Right, so we are at 12,000 feet, which means we need to go up and we need to turn off our lights. Like so. Simple as that. So that is done. Okay, no visible signs of icing, and honestly I don't really see that occurring. If you are concerned, obviously it says that it's 0 degrees out there right now. Monitor your aircraft for icing as if you would any normal aircraft. Okay, so the carburetors are good temperature. The oil temperature does have a question mark. That would simply be because it is 0 degrees outside. It is nothing to be concerned about. You can't always go off of what the iPad says. You must always keep an eye on your gauges. So as you can see, the oil temperature is in the green. The oil pressure is between the two red lines. The carburetor temperature is fine. The water pressure is not a thing that we need to be concerned about at this point because we're not using the water injection. And our cylinder head temperature, which is behind these levers, which you can view more about if you select Control 2, is also in the green. So we are all good right now. Where we aren't in a fantastic position is our BMEP has dropped below 200 and we are at full throttle. Okay? Now this is not a cause for concern, but we need to activate the superchargers, okay? So it is okay to have a BMEP this low for a short period of time. However, if it can be avoided, it would be of benefit. Now, the manifold pressure will drop relatively quickly now as we climb towards 15,000 feet. So our cruise altitude is going to be at around 15,000 feet. So it basically means that we're going to be activating the superchargers as we come to cruise altitude. So what I'm going to do, because of that scenario that is basically being caused, your engine supercharger control is here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So we're going to enter our engine supercharger controls on. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we're going to watch our BMEP and we're going to come back on the throttle. Okay? Then we're going to maintain a BMEP of 210, which is that little red marker at the end of the yellow, or just below that little red marker at the end of the yellow is where we want to maintain that. So now we're going through 15,000 feet, so we want to stop the aircraft from climbing. So come down here and you'll have altitude control. You want to put altitude control on. That will cause the aircraft to hold its current altitude. Then you want to bring the cowl flaps to 0. which is optimal cruise, okay? And there you have it. Now, all you have to do is you just have to monitor. Monitor temperatures, monitor throttle inputs, monitor icing, all the things you would monitor in a normal flying situation, okay? Obviously, your temperatures, you need to make sure that your cylinder head temperatures and your carburetor temperatures and everything are exactly where you would like them to be. So we shouldn't have any issues because we are at our cruising altitude already. And as you can see, all good. Okay, so now that we are at our cruising altitude, what we now want to do is we want to bring our cruising RPM down to about 2200 RPM, okay? So basically using the control F2, F3 method to play with your RPMs, or you can use the little throttle thing as well. Now 2200 is that middle white line right there that I've put the RPM controllers on, as you can see. Okay, so now that's at 2200 RPM. We want to bring the BMEP back because that will fuck with your BMEP. Okay, so then that comes back to 210. And there we go. There we go. Adjusted beautifully. It does take a little bit of Then what you need to do is we need to come down to control 5. We want to take the auto mixture off. We want to bring all our auto mixtures down one click to auto lean, and then we want to relock the auto mixture. Okay, so you want to, using the cow flaps, you want to maintain a cylinder head temperature of around 220 degrees Celsius or within the green arc on your cylinder head temperature, which by pressing Control 2, you can see here, this is your cylinder head temperatures. They are all in the green mark at around 220 degrees Celsius. Okay? We don't need to worry about anything to do with fuel and alternative tanks. We will worry about that in a future episode. So right now, you are all good to cruise for a bit. We will come to the descent procedure at a later point. But basically, we need to watch your ETE. That is your best friend when it comes to figuring out your descent point. But for the moment, sit back, relax, enjoy the fact that you're flying a DC6, and just monitor your dials and make sure everything is good. Okay, so an important thing to note is that when you sort of, get below 30 minutes on your ETE, you should start looking at calculating your descent. Now, the way you want to calculate that is you want to take your cruise altitude and you want to base it on 1,000 feet per minute formula. So if you're at 15,000 feet, you're going to be going down at 1,000 feet per minute. That means you're going to need to start descending 15 minutes before on your ETE. However, you want to also keep a buffer there for fiddling with dials and switches and all that. I recommend 5 minutes. So, I'm at 15,000 feet. I'm going to give myself a 5-minute buffer for fiddling with switches and dials and getting everything set up for the descent. That means I want to start my descent at 20 minutes or so out. So as you can see on my ETE, we are about 40 seconds away from 20 minutes. So, okay, so to descend, you want to come down to control 5, okay? So that's the first port of our call. You want to take your altitude control off, and then you want to slowly push forward on the glide wheel, the climb guide wheel. And as you can see on that dial, we're dropping, and we want to bring that to 1,000 feet. Now this is part of the reason why we give ourselves a buffer, because it does move around a little bit. So as you can see, it is still moving about. So once we establish ourselves on a 1,000 feet per minute descent rate, so still monitoring that, still monitoring, still moving the wheel and monitoring. Okay, so now according to that we've gone over 1,000 feet per minute, but it will come back, so I'm not too concerned about that at this point. I will obviously keep an eye on that. Then, the next thing that you want to do is you need to take your mixture lock off and you want to put all your mixtures up to auto rich and relock your mixture. Okay? Make sure that your carb are all down and that your hydraulic bypass lever is on, which it is. Okay? Then you want to maintain a throttle that allows your BMEP to be at 210 whilst you descend. Okay? So, as we know on the BMEP thing, as you can see, as I'm adjusting the throttle there, the dial is moving. Now, once we get below 12,000 feet, we need to switch off the superchargers and then reset the BMEP to match 210 again. Okay? So again, I will obviously demonstrate this as it comes around. Then obviously at 10,000 feet, landing lights, all those things need to be done as they usually would. And then basically you want to descend down to the pattern height. Now, I recommend somewhere between 1,500 and 2,500 feet, you stop your descent and call that your pattern height. And basically in your pattern height, that is where you will adjust your RPMs and all those things that need to be adjusted to set you up for landing. So that's another reason why we give ourselves that buffer, so that we reach our pattern height at an earlier time than actually required, so that then we have time to set up for landing, key in any ILS things that we might need to do. Again, I'll show that in a separate video. This is just the basics of the DC6 operation from start up all the way to shut down. So as you can see right now, we are coming down towards 12,000 feet. So in a moment, we're going to go up. We're going to go to control 6, I think it is, for the superchargers. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's control 6. And we're going to switch the superchargers off. We're going to need to apply throttle at that point. Again, nothing is in a hurry. You'll also need to keep watching your descent and keep adjusting the autopilot glide wheel. Okay, so we're now coming down past 12,000, so we're going to go up to control 6. Bring it, actually it was control 8, sorry. Bring the superchargers off. Back to control 5, I hate it how it does that. We're going to need to put power in. So as you can see, we're slowly, every movement moves the BMEP dial, and we're back to 210 BMEP. And if you obviously do not be scared to go to the exterior of the aircraft at any time, obviously make sure that things are going the way you expect them to, which they are, as you can see. Everything is happening the exact way that we want it to. We are descending, we're descending about 1,000 feet per minute. All's well here. We come over Hollister Municipal Airport now. So with those superchargers, control 6 works if you pan the camera down. Control 8 also works. You can even do them from down here in control 5 if you just use the camera panning option. All you want to do is sometime after 12,000 you want to reduce those superchargers to the off position. And then you just need to keep adjusting the throttle to maintain that BMEP at around 210. Okay, So, now we're coming down below 10,000 feet. So, I'm just going to pan up from here. Obviously, Control 8 or Control 6 will take you closer to the lights. And then I'm just going to keep adjusting my throttle down, making sure that I am maintaining a 210 BMEP or as close to as possible at all times. As you can also see on our descent gauge, we are maintaining a 1,000 feet per minute descent rate. Now I will pan up. I'm going to just zoom in slightly. Our ETE is 12 minutes and we are below 10,000 feet. So we are making good time here. If you at any point feel as if you are not descending fast enough, that is fully okay. You can go as high as 1,500 feet per minute in this aircraft without having to be concerned about any potential issues. Obviously, for the benefit of the passengers, 1,000 feet per minute is where you want to try and keep it. But if you do find yourself in that situation, 1,500 feet can be done. And I have personally done it before. Same result, normal, the landing was fine. Now, that brings me to a point that I will certainly make. Landing this aircraft, especially from in the cockpit, is not easy. Will probably find that your landing and approach is terrible. Mine still isn't great. So when we do get closer to the pattern height, we will level off using that altitude control switch that we turned off originally to start to descend. Now, what you want to do is on your dial, when you get to your pattern height, you want to flick that altitude control switch on. And basically what will occur is the autopilot will, if it goes past that altitude, will take you back to your selected altitude. So you do not need to be concerned about trying to get in before it gets there or whatever. The autopilot is fully functional and will do what needs to be done. Aircraft's making interesting turn there, but that's okay. Happy to let it do its thing. It's all on autopilot. I have no concerns. All my gauges are reading exactly where I'd like them to be. And that's why I'm not so concerned about being able to see out and above the windows right now, is that I can tell from my gauges alone that everything is sweet. We are now not quite descending at 1,000 feet per minute anymore, so we're going to get a little bit more of a descent rate occurring there, just to obviously not end up in a not so good situation. So in a moment we should be going to make a left turn here down the valley, according to the flight plan. Hello aircraft, if you would please do your job. Just because ever since the last sim update there's been a few autopilot issues with this aircraft here and there. Right at this moment, I just don't trust what's occurring, so I'm going to throw the altitude control switch on. And we're going to maintain our 6,000 feet or so altitude until the aircraft figures out exactly what it's trying to do. I think it's trying to line up with the ILS, but I'm not exactly sure. And this is the great benefit of older aircraft like this, is that sometimes they just do things that you don't expect. So I'm just monitoring. I've got my flight plan open here in a map planner on another screen. I'm just monitoring the aircraft's position in relation to where it should actually be. And at the moment, it seems like it's going directly for San Francisco's ILS. doesn't sort it out in a moment, I will take full manual control and I will hand fly the aircraft in. But whilst I'm hand flying the aircraft in, I will still detail to you exactly what you would do if you were not put in a situation like this. I can actually see San Francisco Airport, where my mouse is. And it appears that it's not going to actually do what it's meant to do. So right now, what's going to happen is I'm going to hand fly this aircraft in. So I am going to turn off that, remove the autopilot mechanical disconnect. Then I'm going to hit Control 1 to put me in a position where I'm in the cockpit. And I'm going to make a left-hand turn. So, if this wasn't the situation that you were put in, that I've just been put in by this aircraft, what you would be doing is you would be continuing down to your pattern point. Okay? This is good practice, though, for the knowledge that things like this can happen and will happen. Okay? It's important to remember that stuff like this is definitely something that occurs. Okay? So we're definitely dropping altitude, which is a good thing. We're going to need to adjust a little bit our positioning in relation to the airport, and that is not a problem. We can absolutely 100% do that. So as you can see, I'm now going to lower, I've got a lot of speed to lose, so I'm going to lower my BMEP down to about 150, so you can see it there on the gauge, okay? Now again, this is simply because of the scenario that has occurred. In fact, I'm going to cut all engine power for a bit to really lose some speed. But in that process, I'm going to keep the nose on the horizon. So what you would do at this point, as you were entering your pattern height, is that you would increase your engine RPMs using Control F3, like what I'm currently doing, to 2,400 RPM is what you would do, okay? Okay, as you can see, the speed has now come back significantly, and we can go in with power again. Making sure that I am in fact still maintaining my positioning correctly for the runway, which does seem to be occurring, which is good. So as we come down through 4,000 feet, we're just watching. We now need to try and, as we're getting low in altitude here, we want to try and keep our BMEP between 100 and 150 so that we don't have an issue with the speed of the aircraft, basically. Again, you would be on autopilot still at this point. I am not. Still having serious problems slowing this puppy down. And you will have this issue. You will have this issue. It is a very hard aircraft to slow down. Requires a lot of work, a lot of babying to get it to do what you need to do. Okay? So now that we're down at 200 knots, I'm going to trim a little bit just for ease of flying. And we're going to keep dropping that altitude down. Now, you may find that depending on the weather that you're flying in, that you may need to drop the engine power quite significantly. You may need to drop it at small increments. You will need to continuously play with the throttle, especially if you end up like we are here, having to hand fly it in. Now that we've dropped below 200 knots, okay, I'm going to bring the gear down. Going to need to obviously add a little bit more power to negate the fact that we've just dropped the landing gear. So in a perfect world, you obviously wouldn't need to be hand flying this aircraft in like what I currently am. Okay? I want to make that very clear. So now we're at about 180 knots. We're not quite on line with the runway, and we are quite low, so we basically want to be maintaining a pretty constant speed right now. And sort of holding an altitude at about 180 knots. It's okay if you climb a little bit. Again, I am literally working on the fly here to hand fly an aircraft that is not the easiest thing to hand fly. If you are at your pattern altitude at this point, anywhere between 1500 and 2500, you know your general proximity to the airport, your speed is slowing down, or you've got your speed down to a point where you can put your gear down, you are doing fine. As long as your RPM is at around 2400 and you are on course for the airport, you are doing very good. That is all you need to be concerned about. I am obviously focusing on a lot of things right now, so as you can see, we are definitely lining up with the runway. Okay? There is no question that we are almost lined up with the runway. Again, this is not an ideal situation to be put in, but I will still absolutely detail to you what we need to do. So, your next position would be, once you get below 170 knots, you then need to set your flaps to 20 degrees, okay? Then that should bring your speed down to 140 knots. Once you get to 140 knots, you want to bring your flaps to 30 degrees. And then flaps 40 at speed 120. Now, when you are lined up and on short final, that is when you want to bring flaps 50 in, or full flaps, okay? So I'm pretty sure I can now see the airport. If at any point you feel as if maybe you're not 100% sure of your whereabouts in relation to the airport, go to the outside view. As you can see there in the distance, I have the runways in sight, okay? I know that I need to make a slight left-hand adjustment, but that is not an issue. That's zoomed me right in. So the reason why obviously I can't see this right now is because my current position has me with the runways in between this bar. Now obviously you would be able to put your head out in real life and check to see what was there. This isn't real life. as close as you'll probably get to in a computer-based flight simulation, but it isn't real life. So, as you can see, I'm maintaining about 180 knots. I'm maintaining anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 feet, and I am hand flying. In a moment, you will see me make a slight left as I line up with the runway. When I do that, because I'm hand flying, that is the point that I will implement my 20 degrees of flaps and all those things. Obviously, if you've been following the steps, you will probably already be at 170 knots with 20 degrees of flaps, and that is absolutely fine. Okay, so now the speed is coming right back, and we're going to go in with some 1, 2, 3. So there's our 20 degrees of flaps there. Now the aircraft is going to slow right up. It's going to take a little bit to slow her down. And then you're going to see the nose dip forward a bit. Now we are a little bit high on the approach here, but that's okay because we are hand flying and we got put in this situation. And that is another thing to remember. If you are a little bit high on approach, it isn't a problem. So now that we've come down to 140, we want to put another lot of flaps in. And as we do that, we want to reduce speed again, whilst trying to maintain obviously being lined up with the runway. So now we're getting some good stutters, is what's occurring. Hello? Load in. This is really making it difficult. There we go. There we go. All good. So now we're at 120. We're going to go almost full flaps. And now we're on short final. We're going to go actual full flaps. Okay? So as you can see, it looks like I am sort of fighting a little bit with the aircraft, and I will be honest with you, I am, because this is an old plane and it is not an easy aircraft to fly, and the stutters are causing me some serious problems as well. I don't know why I'm getting stutters. I've never got stutters at San Francisco before in this aircraft. Bit of a crosswind that we are trying to negate. Now, none of our PAPI lights are where we want them to be. And you know what? That isn't the end of the world. Our speed got a little bit low there, down to 100 knots. We want to put a little bit of power in to help to negotiate that. And now, as we float down over the runway, as we get more stutters, which is really, really quite frustrating. Bit of a long float, but there's obviously a decent wind that we were having to... And we're down. So now we go that, and we go full reverse thrust. Nice long runway here at San Francisco, so I'm not even touching the brakes at this point. I'm just literally allowing reverse thrust to do its job. Now we will brake and we will turn to the left and exit the runway. So I highly recommend when you are flying this aircraft for the first times, you don't necessarily need to take off from a large runway, but I do recommend landing on a large runway. You know, certain situations can occur, like what just happened with strong crosswinds and lots of float and all that sort of stuff. So now we will just basically idle throttle her in to a parking spot somewhere up here at the terminal, and then we will run through the shutdown checklist. What I'm basically going to do is, I know I'm not following the yellow markers directly, but we're just going to pull into this gate up here. So I just want to reiterate, once we're parked up, just because you had to watch me obviously hand fly this in, I just want to reiterate once we're parked up the exact procedures of what you've just been through so that you can help get a better idea and memorization of it. Okay, so that's good. We pull the parking brake on. So, with the approach and landing, to simplify it. So we've gotten to the point where we've got to our pattern height and we're maintaining a BMEP of between 100 and 150 whilst we position ourselves in relation to the airport or allow the autopilot to position us in relation to the airport. Then we want to set the prop RPM to 2400. Once we've done that, we want to reduce the engine power to as low as possible to start losing speed to make sure that we get to the intended speeds that we're looking for. Once we get to 180 knots, I drop my landing gear. Some people wait until 130, 140. I like to do it because it's a kind of thing that gets forgotten. So at 180 knots, I drop my landing gear. At 170 knots, I drop to 20 degrees of flaps. Then, dropping that 20 degrees of flaps should bring you down to 140 knots. At that point, you drop in another notch of flaps, which brings us to 30 degrees of flaps. Then, once you get to 120, you want to get 40 degrees of flaps. Now, you want to be holding an approach speed of about 110 to 120, okay? And then on very short final, like what you saw, when we're at about a couple of 100 feet, we go flaps 50. And then you simply bring it in. Touchdown speed is usually somewhere between 100 and 110-ish, give or take weather conditions, all those sorts of variables that can occur. Obviously, once you touch down, use reverse thrust, okay? Some people have a controller. Some people holding F2 works. For others, you will need to hit Control W to put the props in reverse pitch and then hold F2. You'll need to obviously experiment with this. I cannot give you the answers because it seems that sort of everyone is different. Now, usually when we clear the runway, we would do the pitot heat off and we would put the prop pitch back to full fine. We didn't because we did a hand-based landing and the concentration was on that. So usually you would exit the runway. At that point, you would go up. You would retract your flaps first, then you would go up, Control 8. You would do your pitot heat off, your landing lights off, your cow flaps full open, and you would use Control 3 to put your prop pitch back to 100%. Okay, so we're going to do that now. We're going to go with flaps up. We're going to go to Control 8. We are going to bring the cow flaps fully open, if it allows me to. Like so. All cow flaps fully open. We take off our lights. There we go. And pitot heat comes off. So again, those are things that you do not need to be super concerned about. If you do obviously have a completely functioning autopilot all the way to the end, obviously you're going to be in a much better mindset and you're going to remember these things as soon as you come off the runway. Now, it's not a case of I didn't remember these things. It's a case of I wanted to exit the runway. I saw my gate. It was right there. I wanted to get to it. I knew that it wouldn't take me long. I knew that it wouldn't cause an issue. But if you want to obviously fly in a more professional manner, removing those items once you've exited the runway is the thing to do. However, it is not the be-all and end-all, and you can most certainly do them at the gate once you have pulled in. Right, so we need to go now completely forward on prop pitch with Control F3, which is brilliant. Then we want to go to Control 5. You want to put your gust lock on. Again, this is something that you should be using on the ground when taxiing. Now, shutdown and parking. So once we're parked, which we are, and we're in Control 5, we want to take the mixture lock off. And then we want to idle cut off all our mixtures. Like so. Okay? Then you want to go straight over to Control 0 and you want to get the ramp manager. You want to pull the iPad out and you want to get that ground power unit attached. Then you want to go up to Control 6 and you want to have the battery ground power and the plain battery on. Okay? Obviously, you want to turn off all your magnetos. And then you want to turn off seatbelt signs, your beacon, your no smoking sign, all of those things. If you did turn on your radome and windshield heat, this is the time to turn that off as well. Oh, you also want to turn off your inverters. I do apologize. So inverters need to come off. They need to come off. This working with these buttons sometimes can be quite annoying. And then you also want to take off your generators. So that's all off as well. Now, once you've turned all of that off, you want to be doing, as I said, your radome heat / windshield de-ice. And we are going to go to Control 1. And what we're going to do at Control 1 is we're going to disarm the side window, like so. And we're going to drag the window open, okay? At that point, we're going to spin around the other way, and we're going to fold up the engineer's seat by clicking on it, and simply up with the armrests as well, okay? And we're going to come back to the iPad, and what we're going to do is we are going to open the cargo holds, we're going to open the front cabin exit, we're going to open the main cabin exit, and then we're going to wait a few moments for that to all occur. If you need to go and check outside, feel free to go and check outside. As you can see, everything is open. So now, back in, over to the pad, front cabin stairs out, and main cabin stairs out. Then, if you want to, you can go to your maintenance manager here on the pad. You can repair your engines, you can service your props, you can top up your engines, all those things that you may or may not want to do at this point. And ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. You have successfully flown the study level PMDG DC6 in probably the most simplified way that an idiot can put it. So, ladies and gentlemen, that does bring us to the end and our final destination here of San Francisco. If you did enjoy my content within this video and the way I tried to explain things in the most simple and straightforward ways, please do consider hitting the like button, hitting the subscribe button, leaving a comment on where I could improve in future videos where I do similar scenarios like this. In future DC6 videos, we will work on programming the GPS from in the cockpit, programming in ILS, we'll work on switching tanks mid-flight, and we will also work with water injection takeoffs, hot dogging the aircraft, and just having general fun and all the sorts of things you can do with the DC6 when you're not trying to fly professionally. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, legends of the highest regard, thank you so much. Wherever you are in the world, you make sure you look after yourself, you stay safe, you stay well, you don't do anyone I wouldn't do, and I will catch you in the next video. Cheers.